Welcome back to the show. I'm Steve Levy, the host. This is the Steve Levy Show. The show can be found, you can actually watch the show and find out information at www.stevelevyshow.com. I'm very pleased to announce that I have Lee Goodman. Lee Goodman is an attorney, professional mediator. He's an arbitrator. He recently ran for the 10th District, just north of the Chicago area. Lee was raised on the North Shore of Chicago and currently lives in Northbrook. Lee received his public service awards from the Constitutional Rights Foundation and the Chicago Bar Foundation. He has written 2 books for lawyers. He is past president of the Mediators Professional Association and has served on the board of the Jewish Bar Association, the North Suburban Bar Association, and the Assembly of Illinois State Bar Association, and was the first man ever elected to the board of Women's Bar Association in Illinois. Curious how he pulled that off. Lee is founder of the Northbrook Peace Committee, which promotes peaceful solutions to international conflicts. I'm happy to introduce Lee Goodman. Well, Mr. Goodman.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, too. I'd like to jump right into a very important issue, if not the most important issue and topic that's occurring right now, the war in Iraq. The President's position is that we stay in Iraq. What are your thoughts on this?
So long as we stay in Iraq, it means we're an occupying army. So long as we stay in Iraq, not only are our soldiers being killed, we are killing people on the other side, including civilians, on a daily basis. We have to get out. We shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Do you feel that the administration has made mistakes that have put us in a worse position?
Everything that this administration has done with regard to Iraq has been a mistake. The very earliest planning, the estimates they made, at best it's a mistake. At worst it's an outright deception and lie.
Wow. And the relationship between the U.S. and the United Nations, how do you see that?
Well, I still think that other nations of the world can be engaged with us in a productive manner. The President went out of his way not to deal with other nations through the United Nations, so he's got an awful lot of work to do to get their confidence back.
And there's been some discussions about a potential draft. If we continue to occupy Iraq, many believe that they'll have to instill a draft because of the resources that we have, the lack of resources and troops. What are your feelings on that?
We ran out of troops quite a while ago, and we've been pulling in troops from all around the world, extending the tours of duty of people who were already in Iraq. Recently, a lawsuit was filed by some of the people in the armed forces protesting that they've been required to stay longer than they had been told they would have to stay in Iraq. If we're going to stay in Iraq and the President shows no indications of doing anything else, there's going to be a draft.
And do you feel that the equalization of women, that women will be drafted as well if there's a draft, or hard to predict?
Well, it's difficult to predict, except if you take a look at the bills that have been introduced into Congress, they do call for drafting females as well as males. We've had women involved in combat situations from the earliest days of the Iraq War, so there's really no reason why we wouldn't have them involved in the draft this time.
And you have children, right? Or do you have children? You do, right?
I do.
And does the draft or the idea of a draft affect you more because you have children?
It affects me because lots of people have children. As my kids were growing up, we got to know a lot of their friends. There aren't any of these kids who I think needs to be sent over to Iraq to fight in a war, particularly if they don't want to go. It's not just for my children.
And with that statement, I'd also like to move on to something that's also very important to all of us, which is health care. President Bush has a prescription drug program that many say profit the drug companies. Do you feel that his plan for health care is one that's going to give people more drugs and help them?
Well, the only plan that we've seen, real concrete plan, was his so-called prescription drug benefit for seniors under Medicare. Medicare is a program that provides health care funding for people over 65 years old. The program he put in has been soundly rejected by virtually all senior citizens groups and by senior citizens themselves, and the early experience with it shows that they're simply not participating. So there is no public health care program being put forward so far by this administration, and that's a terrible failing because people are crying out for health care.
Now, I've read statistics that many Americans feel, or that statisticians feel, that the cost of health care has gone up because of the number of uninsured people. Is that particularly true?
There's any number of reasons health care costs have gone up. uninsured people do get a certain level of health care through emergency room admissions, etc., which is a much more expensive way to provide health care than if they were getting it through a physician's office, for instance. So that's part of the problem.
Howard Dean spoke about preventive care within healthcare as one of the ways to improve the overall healthiness of our society.
Well, Howard Dean's a physician. You'd think he probably knows a little bit what he's talking about. But not only he, but lots of public health experts have criticized the current system that we have, where insurance companies will pay for the emergency care or they'll pay for the illnesses, but they won't pay very much or anything under many plans for prevention. It's a very foolish plan from an economic standpoint.
And there's a statistic on your website that says 1 in 6 Americans have no insurance, and nearly 1 in 3 went out without insurance during some part of this past year. Do you think the President can justify his program with those statistics?
I think that the country as a whole is crying out. It's almost unanimous. People want a change in health care. So far, the President is not offering any solution. To tell you the truth, there are not many solutions being offered at all in Congress, either by his party or by the other party. So we're looking for leadership to come forward on this. There are groups that have been working on this issue. There's one right here in Chicago. They've got over 12,000 physicians signed on for a plan that calls for government funding of health care, a single-payer plan. But so far the leadership is not coming from the political sphere. It's coming from physicians and patients and people who see the problem.
I see. Moving on to the economy, do you feel the economy is picking up?
I don't see a lot of indication of it. We hear that we've been hearing for months and months the economy is picking up, but the most important measure is employment, and so far the employment picture is not encouraging.
Well, what's the picture like in the North Shore of Chicago? Is that doing fundamentally better than the rest of Illinois, the rest of Chicago?
There's no indication that it is. When you say the North Shore of Chicago, you're not just talking about lakefront mansions. You're talking about middle management people. You're talking about people whose kids are getting out of college who can't find jobs. The economy nationwide, and including the North Shore and including Chicago, has got a long ways to go.
And in terms of the school systems, how do you feel the school systems have been over the past 4 years? Have they improved, or No Child Left Behind, has that been a successful program?
All of the school administrators and teachers that I've spoken with, school board members and parents, virtually everyone who's involved on a day-to-day basis with education says that No Child Left Behind has been an ineffective program as far as helping education. The funding never came through that was promised, and the rest, all that was left of No Child Left Behind, was interference.
Wow. What were some of the other major issues that people brought to you when you were running as a Democrat for the 10th District? What were things that Americans came to you and asked, said, I need some help on these things?
Well, that's part of the real interesting part about running for office is people do come to you and say, here's the problem I've got. And there were literally dozens of issues that people were concerned about, including employment and health care and the war. Civil liberties was something that's very much on people's minds. And unfortunately, we sort of got left behind by the presidential campaigns, which were very vigorous in other states, but we weren't a targeted state, and therefore very little of the public debate actually happened here. So people were looking for solutions and looking for answers, and the political parties, by and large, were not responding.
Do you feel that because Barack Obama perhaps had such a great lead over Alan Keyes that they were less responsive maybe to people's needs?
I don't know to what extent that was an influence or not. I think that to a great extent what happened was the Kerry campaign made a strategic decision to focus its resources outside of Illinois. And as a result, we didn't see the TV commercials, we didn't hear the public debate. We heard about a presidential campaign that was going on other places, but we weren't part of it.
Moving back to the war in Iraq, the war in Iraq is costing a ton of money, right? The original estimates were $200 billion, and it could be up to $400 billion. Where will it end?
No one knows if it will ever end. There's no indication that the president wants to end this war, and there's a lot of indications that the people who are behind the president see this as a decades-long or never-ending war in the entire Middle East.
Well, what do you see as a solution to Iraq, if there is one at this time?
We have to recognize that these are human beings and we're killing them, and if we can understand that at the very basic human level, then we'll find a solution. Until we can start seeing these people as equally deserving of rights and dignity as the people who live next door or sit next to us, until we can understand that, there probably is no solution.
Do you feel that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict plays a part in Iraq?
Well, everything that goes on in that region is part of the picture.
Do you feel that the past 4 years has improved the situation with the Israeli-Palestinian or not?
Well, we're at a juncture now where we're going to have to wait and see what happens. For quite a while, the Israeli posture has been wait until Arafat's gone. Well, Arafat's gone.
Right.
And we don't really know what comes next. We can be hopeful about it, and I'm very optimistic. I'd like to think that despite the president's policies, we may actually see progress in that region. But no one knows for sure.
Do you feel that the U.S. should play a more integral role in solving the issues in, between the Israelis and Palestinians?
I would like to see the U.S. helping to solve lots of the world's problems. Unfortunately, what we've been doing is creating lots of the world's problems. So we've got a lot of work to do.
And do you feel that the U.S. has isolated itself so much that it's not repairable?
No. No, we are still a mighty nation, both because of our economy and our people, our history, and we still do have a well of respect out in the world, even though it's diminished from where it was before the current presidency. So there's still a lot we can do.
And Great Britain and Australia went along, but many countries didn't. Do you feel that we have a strong relationship with Great Britain after going in the war together, them being our strongest ally?
Well, the real question is, what do the people, as opposed to the governments of some of these nations, think? Because the governments will change, but the people will be there. And I still think that the people of many of these nations still have a great deal of respect for the people of this country, even if they don't have much respect for some of our leaders.
What's the grassroots movement like in America today?
Well, that's the most amazing thing. Is I've been involved in a number of campaigns, and I've never seen one like we're seeing right now, where just a few weeks after the election, people are already organizing, they're meeting, they're planning and discussing. They're not discouraged, they're moving forward, and I think we're going to see an enormous amount of grassroots effort like we really haven't seen in a long time.
Great. Is there anything that you would like to say to the American people regarding sort of what, in terms of hopes and dreams and being moved and inspired in the next 4 years? What are the things that they should be thinking about?
I think we should all be keeping in mind that we're all one people, and I'm not just talking about the United States, I'm talking about the entire world. To the extent that we can keep connected at that level and keep from dividing ourselves from other people, to the extent we can keep from thinking of ourselves as different from people in different colored states on a map, then we've got hope.
Great. Thank you very much, Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on the show.
Pleasure.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.